2 creepy new Dogman stories, including the Dogman and the alien at the train station, which starts at that time I hope I remember to put on screen. But first we've got this other newly submitted and supposedly true tale that the author himself has chosen to call the Left-for-Dead Dogman. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I am an old werewolf, and if it's alright, I'd like to submit my own story for your show. I noticed that you read anonymous stories, and that's for me, because my own family doesn't know about my condition. They don't need to know either, but I need to tell someone, and so you're elected. Please let me know if you don't want it so I can try somewhere else, but I think this would fit your show to a T. If it isn't long enough, feel free to add more adjectives or whatever, but it's a pretty straightforward set of events, so I don't know how much you can add to it. This happened a long time ago, and I guess I could send you more stories about things that have happened to me since, but they're animal things for the most part. Things that are interesting to dogs sniffing around in the night. Most of my werewolf stories don't seem to translate well as stories for humans, and that's one of the reasons I don't really have very many friends any longer. I spend as much time as I can these days in nature, because I feel more at home there than I do inside a human home any longer. From what I've been reading and hearing about the state of affairs you guys are coping with, I think I might be better off in the woods, and not that much more lonely than many of you. We wolves are savage for the sake of survival, but we tend not to savage each other, or destroy our own society from within. That's a uniquely human trait, and it's one of the reasons I'd rather identify with the beasts than with the human kinds of animals. You might say it's just sour grapes for how I got to be this way in the first place. You see, way back in time before most of you out there were even born, I was a gambling man. I loved to play the odds, and I would bet on anything. For some reason, when I couldn't pay back my debts, there was this group of guys who got upset with me about that. These gentlemen pointed out that I owed them money, and then they abruptly and roughly, invited me into their limo and drove me out to this place. It was a muddy spot in the country, but it wasn't out in the woods. It was sort of out behind 2 different houses. Both houses had lights on inside, but I never saw anyone come to any of the windows while I was looking. I was given a shovel and made to dig my own grave. Have you ever dug your own grave? It isn't easy, and it takes a lot longer than you'd think. They make it look simple in the movies, but even getting it rectangular is hard. There were 2 limos full of guys watching me dig, and some of them kept asking the boss if they could help me since I was such a phoebe and all that. On my end, it was the first time in my life I was enjoying hard labor. That's because I knew as soon as the digging ended, I was a goner. And that was the announced plan too, just as you might expect. Except my debtors were particularly angry at me. Rather than making my exit quick, they wanted to make it slow and painful. So instead of just having one of several professional hitmen finish me off quick, they brought a trio of Doberman pinchers out of the back of the second limo, and they let them loose on me. These were the craziest looking Dobermans I'd ever seen. They had red eyes, which I hadn't even known was a thing. They seriously looked like devil dogs as the 3 of them approached me as one, growling and lowering themselves to the ground. When they pounced, they each went for a different vulnerable spot, and I was taken down quickly and savagely. I fell 4 or 5 feet downward into my own sloppy and muddy grave, and that was also quite an unpleasant experience. I expected the dogs to leap into the hole and finish me off, but instead I dimly remember looking upward and seeing the dogs and the men all staring downward at me. The humans were laughing and pointing, and one of them was shoveling dirt onto me. They seemed to be saying things to mock me, but I was beginning to move beyond caring about earthly matters any longer. I accepted that it was time for me to move on. But somehow, the sleep never overtook me. I felt an odd surge of energy inside myself instead. Rather than ceasing to exist, I was somehow feeling reinvigorated. More than that, I was feeling strong. I stood up and leaned on the edge of the terrible grave I had dug, and the men screamed and backed away. I saw that they were moving toward returning into their limos, and so I found myself lifting my body up and out of the grave, and running, sometimes upright, and sometimes down on all fours, toward those men. I slammed the car doors on them as they tried to get in their vehicles, and I pulled them out as though I was living inside a video game. I was simultaneously both scared of and angry at these men, and I was going ape on them. I wasn't really sure how I had gotten so strong, but I knew that my only chance for survival was if none of these men was ever able to tell anyone what had happened to me. And none of them did either. Even when they shot at me, it didn't feel real. I had been shot by a BB gun when I was a kid. Now that was a horrible experience, and very painful. Nothing these mobsters shot at me was really hurting at all. I started to wonder what they were shooting, but when I examined their weapons later, they certainly all looked very real to me. So when the dust began settling from all the fighting, I noticed the Dobermans came out from the shadows. They were all looking at me with their red eyes. I wondered if they were about to jump me again, and I prepared myself for another battle. And then all at once, at the same time as each other, those three dogs raised themselves up on their hind legs, right? Looking at me the entire time, never breaking their stare, right? And then blammo, they each ran away in a different direction from the other two, but they all ran upright, like human beings. It was so incredibly surreal that it made me feel very nauseous. I walked over to heave into a bird bath, but when I looked down into the water, I caught my reflection for the first time. I had become a werewolf. I was now an actual living dogman. I was not a human any longer. I sat there for a while feeling panicked, trying to think it through, but eventually the animal took over. And I don't really remember what else happened that night. It wasn't really until I woke up in someone's tool shed the next morning that I started to put together what had happened. I must have become a werewolf, and it was the bite from those Dobermans that did it. But they must have been able to keep that a secret from the mob. I have no idea how long they maintained their cover, and I've never seen them again, so I can't ask them. The only thing I can say is that they used me to gain their own freedom. I guess that's why they had no reason to attack me a second time on that night. So since then, I find that I transform 23 or 24 nights a month when I'm out in the wild, but not quite as many when I'm in with other humans. This is why I don't like to visit relatives for more than a week, and I always schedule it around the new moon. I want to get back out in the wild before the moon gets too much fuller. But when I am in human settlements these days, I am stunned by how little anyone talks to each other or even makes eye contact anymore. I'm not in a place to judge since I literally live as a hermit much of the time, even at my age. I mean, life is a lot easier if you don't have to deal with other people's baggage. There were some points early in my werewolf years when I felt I was missing this person or that. I managed to track down a couple of my friends and spend some time with them. Within an hour, my mind was drifting at their stories of civilization, and I found myself staring out the window like a schoolboy on a warm summer day. I'm just not that good at social stuff anymore. I do still care about my friends and family, and I do try to maintain as many relationships as I can, but I also feel far happier when I'm able to get myself a good 8 or 10 hours of alone time on every single day. I think it truly helps to cope with an insane world, If you can spend most of your day without noise and opinions and propaganda and coercion. And I don't just mean from the media, I mean from other people too. The only thing I've learned for certain from my years dealing with being a werewolf is that it's truly important to make up your own mind about each separate thing based on the evidence that you have available to you, and to do your best to keep other people's voices out of your own head. Other than that, I'm about as dumb as a board. But that is the one thing I can tell you without a doubt, and that seems as good a place as any to cut this off, as I believe I have thoroughly explained as many of the details as I can remember about my first time becoming a dogman. The Dogman and the Alien. Dear Scary Stories NYC. I have a weird story from the pandemic for you. I haven't told it to anyone before because when I started telling my wife, she told me that I wasn't being funny and that I should see a shrink. I apologized and said I was only telling her an out-of-season Halloween story, and she forgave me. But I can't risk bringing it up with her or anyone else she knows ever again. This is why I'm sending it to you anonymously, because it's driving me crazy, and I gotta tell someone. I have nightmares about this experience, and so I hope that talking about it in an email will get it out of my system. When the pandemic got fully underway, my work shifted to work at home. I found myself having a hard time getting used to it, so I decided to go back to my old time of waking up, when I used to have to commute into the city. I would walk to the train station, take the commuter line to the business district, then usually have enough time to grab a breakfast before work. So I decided to walk to the station, jog around that area which is wooded and nice, until I would have gotten into the city, then go home for breakfast and work. It worked to get me back in the swing of things, plus I was losing weight while my coworkers were plumping out. Things started to feel better for me, until that one weird morning down by the train station. Well, the first weird morning, I guess I should say. I did a double take because I could swear I saw a statue of a space alien standing in the shadows not 40 feet from the main entrance to the station. I ducked out of the way and hid, staring at the thing intently because I found it absolutely terrifying. Now, I have never ducked behind a bush when I saw a statue before, so this was clearly not an ordinary statue. To be honest, I feared that it was alive and just standing still, and it was a far more intense fear than I have had since I was a young child. While I stared, I thought I saw movement, but then I realized it was some kind of dripping, not a body movement. When the thing stood perfectly still, it appeared to either be melting or possibly drooling in the intensely hot but dark and overcast morning. I also thought at points that I might be seeing a few straggly but thick hairs coming from his chin. But then it would drip off and I would once again suspect mucus or saliva, or even the creature's body itself melting. I say creature, but I still had not seen it move under its own power, so I still was not sure. It looked like a bulbous-headed space alien from the movies, with a very small and frail-looking body. It was so still it looked like a large doll or a small statue, the entire thing standing maybe 3.5 or 4 feet tall. The one way it did not resemble your typical Hollywood alien was that I could see the whites of its eyes. In fact, they were almost entirely white, with only one pinpoint of blackness that seemed to indicate the direction the entity or whatever it was looking. My eyes caught movement to my left, and from in front of the bulbous-headed alien creature. That was when I saw it tilt its head, ever so slightly upward, and more of something dripped down off the chin onto the walkway beneath it. The creature moving out of the wooded area and into the presence of the alien was far larger and far more muscular and solid-looking a beast. I could hear its feet padding down, and it was not trying to stop as it walked lightly. Initially, I thought I was looking at a Bigfoot, a magnificent muscle-bound Giga Chad Sasquatch with legs and arms as thick as tree trunks, and a mane on his head like a dark-haired, upright walking lion. But there were aspects of this big 9-foot-tall beast man that were not like what I've been told the Bigfoot looks like. This beast had a pointed ear visible to me, and although it was not all the way up on the top of its head, it was certainly up higher than a human ear should be. The beastman's face was extended out into a toothy animal snout, and if you only looked at the face, you would probably think werewolf. It did not, however, have legs that looked canine, and it did not run on its toes. It had pretty big feet, but they ended in crazy-looking claws, not toes with toenails, as I've seen Bigfoot depicted. So was this a dogman or a werewolf? Possibly. I can't really know or tell. It was not behaving as a wild animal, though. It was just staring at the pinpoint-eyed alien, who was staring back at it. I started to wonder what they were thinking about, and I wondered if they knew I was watching them. Just then, very slowly, they both started to turn their heads in my direction, and I booked it out of there to run home. That day I ordered an exercise bicycle and I started to do my morning exercise in the basement instead of walking over to the train station neighborhood. After a month or so toward the end of that summer, I began to feel very cooped up, so I went back to walking outside to get some exercise in before breakfast. The thing is, I avoided going near the station where I had seen those things my wife won't allow me to talk about. I just went straight to the forest path where I had enjoyed running earlier in the pandemic. And of course I wouldn't even be mentioning this if I hadn't caught sight of the big dogman again, standing in the bushes off the road and staring at something. I should have just run back the way I came. Of course I didn't, though. I wanted to see it again. I wanted to know for sure what that wolf-headed man thing was looking at. And sure enough, I did find the alien again. But it either had become smaller, or else possibly it was a different alien altogether. This time, I didn't wait for them to turn and look at me. I just retreated and went home to ride my exercise bike in the basement. I haven't seen either creature since then, so it's been years and no more aliens or dogmen. Now, I don't really personally think that was a creature from outer space. I'm not saying I know what it was, but that dogman did, and he sure looked and smelled like an earth creature to me. He was like a dog mixed with a bear, sort of, and he seemed very solid and real. The weird little fragile big-eyed thing, though, that seemed utterly bizarre. I told you, I thought it was a statue at first. Now I wonder if it was maybe an insect. If it hadn't been dripping or oozing, I might guess it was a robot. Whatever it was, what do you think the connection was between it and that big hairy dogman? Were they communicating in some way? What exactly were they doing together anyway? It's something that I will always wonder about, even as I sincerely hope that I never see either creature ever again. If I said I wasn't happy, then it would be lying. Our channel members just got rejoined by Brian. Thanks, Brian Anderson. We're very glad to have you back. Please join me in welcoming back Brian Anderson to our top tier of our channel membership. Brian gets to see our secret uncensored episodes, of which we have 2 upcoming this weekend and 4 total per month. He also gets to see our over 25 hours of archived secret Dogman videos, and I'm currently working on the next chapter of the archive to add some hours to that total. Plus, sometimes Brian gets to see secret behind-the-scenes stuff, or previews of episodes in advance of the general public, and you can have all these perks too. Just listen to our international TV spokesmongrel Henry Lee Dogman. He'll explain it all in simple terms. Hank? Thanks, Biggie. And thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button, or join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that one. It cuts off after, I think, 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.